Have a seat.
Hi.
Welcome to Loyola.
Thank you very much.
So Joel and I just met, and so I'm going to learn about Joel as you learn about Joel. So Joel, Jay tells us that you're a film music supervisor in Los Angeles, and exactly what does that mean?
A music supervisor has a lot of different kind of descriptions that people have applied to it. Essentially what it is, the way I look at it, is that it is somebody whose sole role is to supervise every aspect of music for a motion picture or television show. So when you have, you talk about in a production, you have a post-production supervisor, they oversee the editors, they oversee, the sound foley, they oversee budgets and scheduling, everything like that. It's the same for a music supervisor. Their job is to oversee the selection and hiring of a composer, the selection and hiring of music editors, the choices in music as far as songs. They're supposed to work with the composer creatively, work with the soundtrack label if it comes in, work on budgets, scheduling, everything like that, very technical stuff, but at the same time have an ear for good music, something that's appropriate for the film and for the budget of the film.
What's the range of money that people make for this kind of work?
That they make for it? It's going down. It's
or that you pay for it?
That we pay for licensed songs?
Well,
you're talking about?
if you're
both are all going down.
Is that right?
It's all going down. Yeah, I mean, and it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about licensing a hit song, it's still going to be pretty high. It's going to be potentially in the hundreds of thousands and stuff like that. But it's all horse trading. There's no real kind of set scale for what something like that is going to cost, because then you start bartering with, well, I'm going to put it in the trailer, we'll make sure you're on our TV buy, which is going to be $15 million in TV buy, so it'll help drive the sales for the album. And you can barter a lot of this stuff and barter the costs down if you include it in some advertising. But a lot of times they'll also look at it and say, hey, look, you're getting a lot of bang for having our song in your advertising. We want a lot more money too. So it can be really complicated. But at the same time, one of the things at Trimark and Lionsgate, they prided themselves as being like the real independent studios. Their budgets were much lower than the bigger studios, anywhere between $2 to $10 million, which is minuscule for a lot of these studio pictures. So our music budgets were about the same. So we had to be very creative in how we spent our money. So we would actually go out there and find up-and-coming bands, people who were on independent labels, people who weren't signed, people who didn't have major publishing deals, we didn't have to pay as much money to, every time one of the major labels lifts a pen, you're talking about at least $2,500. But if you go and do a deal with a band that is friends of yours that you've known forever, you call them up and say, hey, look, I only got $500 for this scene. Do you want to make a deal? We'll license your song. We'll put you in the movie. And if you have a good relationship and they're into it and they really want to get into it and they like the movie, people will do different deals. So I've seen anything from almost a gratis use for people who really want to be in it to I've paid as much as $500,000 for a song.
$500,000, huh? Who was that?
Who was that? I think we got Mary J. Blige for something like that, and I think we paid $250,000 for Coldplay. So.
Wow. How do you get paid?
A music supervisor is going to get paid as, like I said, they're a service job. So music supervisor will get paid as a fee, generally a flat fee. Some people get on a per song basis, but I think that's kind of ridiculous, because that's, if you're going to be a clearance person, that's one thing. But if you're actually providing a service, like I said, the whole kit and caboodle of like budgeting, scheduling, creative, everything like that, you are a part of the crew, and you should get paid like any other crew member. So you get a flat fee, or sometimes you get a weekly basis depending on how long you're on the show. The great part about being a music supervisor, as opposed to, and this is the big secret, when I say that they're a lot like a post supervisor or an art direction or somebody like that, the big difference between a music supervisor and those guys is, again, gets to the thing where they think that we're all rock stars. So we get to have our name in the front credits of the films. We get to be in the billing block for the posters, and we also get points on the records a lot of times. Really? So we'll get paid our fee, but then we'll also get points on the soundtrack albums we hope we'll put together and stuff like that. So we are participants in a bunch of different kinds of things. So we try and get paid however we can.
Yeah, and keeping track of that must be a job in itself.
Yes, it is, yes.
What kind of skills, if somebody wanted your job, what kind of skills did they need to develop to take that job?
Well, I mean, that gets into when I first started saying what a music supervisor is. It really, like I said, in my definition, in fact, there's a movement right now with the Recording Academy to kind of make almost like a guild for music supervisors, saying you need to have these skill sets, you know, and you have to treat it like it is, like you're a real supervisor for these things. So you have to have a business affairs background, you have to know how to do contracts, you have to understand copyright, you have to understand kind of budgeting, you have to have relationships at all the labels and all the publishing companies, you have to show that you're detail oriented, and almost as a side thing, you really have to have great taste. It's almost much more important that you are really organized and have a good business sense about it, because, you know, a lot of times there's a lot of creative people involved in the project who can bring music and everything like that, but without the proper business backing, it's completely worthless.
You're a musician?
Barely. That's actually why I got into music supervision, because like I said, I grew up with musicians, and I was like, okay, I'm never going to be as good as these guys, so I'll figure something else out.
How many people have your job?
There's a lot of people out there calling themselves, you know, music supervisors. Again, I keep emphasizing the fact that you need, you know, a really strong basis in business and everything like that. We always like to say that you can always tell when there's that there's a real bad time at record labels when there's a lot more music supervisors, because they start shedding A&R people and they start looking at what they can do, and they're like, oh, I guess I could be a music supervisor. So, you know, you get a lot of these music supervisors who start, like, you know, thinking that they're just into it, and that the sole job is to pick songs and give it to the director, and then, you know, that's about it. And these guys generally get replaced, and all their music gets replaced as well when they realize it. Because unfortunately, you know, you think about music supervisor, and, you know, mostly they're going to think about, like, the kind of a rock star guy who gets to hang out with, you know, rock stars and movie stars, and that's the kind of job. But those are the guys that, you know, really, you know, when it comes down to the 11th hour, are gone. And, you know, somebody who has a little bit more sense about them has to come in and fix it at the 11th hour.
How many hours of the day do you watch films?
Do I watch films? It depends on what I'm working on. You know, I listen to music a lot more than I watch films. If I've watched, I don't watch a lot of movies that I'm not working on right now.
Well, I mean, what do you work on? You must have always have something going, right?
Yeah, no, we're generally working on a number of pictures at the same time, but, you know, I have a pretty good sense if I've seen a picture, you know, once or twice. I know what the scenes are, and I know kind of the music that's going to work there. When it comes specifically to trying out different stuff, then I'll watch a scene repeatedly over and over and over again and try different songs out and see how it times out and everything.
Gee, how did you get such an interesting job?
Yeah, it sounds good, doesn't it? I came into it a little bit backwards. You know, I grew up around musicians and kind of made a pledge to myself that I would never get in the music industry. But one thing came to another, that I was working on set doing a lot of production work, and I decided I wanted to get a little bit more regular job, so I started working at Trimark Pictures in their production department, working in development, and at that time, and also in business affairs, and at that time Trimark was a very small company, and the deal I made with my boss, who was the head of production at that time, was that, you know, if I, you know, pushed hard enough and really developed something, I could really, you know, make it my own. So I saw that there was a need for music in all the films. Every time we went through it, it seemed like they were reinventing the wheel. So I said, look, why don't I try and take a swing at getting into the music department and see where that leads. So I basically started making up the job myself, and you know, called a lot of the music supervisors I knew, called a lot of lawyers, met with every composer I could possibly meet with, and taught myself the game, and you know, started the music department for Trimark that way. From there, we developed a pretty big publishing catalog. Eventually, Lionsgate Pictures bought Trimark. They were in a similar situation where they were a complete mess as far as music. So I came in and formed a music department for Lionsgate as well, built a huge publishing catalog for them, did a couple of big publishing deals, and supervised basically all their films. And so
that's a huge undertaking.
And I was there for about a little over a decade doing that. So.
Really? Can you name some of the films that you've worked on?
Sure. I was music supervisor on things like Monsters Ball, Rules of Attraction. I can't remember. I always go blank out with this Wonderland. A bunch of basically anything that came out of Lionsgate as a production, I supervised. I also worked as the music executive for Crash, which won the Oscar for a whole assortment of pictures.
You ever hired this guy here?
I have, as a matter of fact. We've worked together a couple times in the past.
How does that work? I mean, does he find you or you find him?
In this case, I think that we kind of found each other through a gentleman by the name of Scott Aegis, and also through Terrence Blanchard, who you've worked with a number of times in the past, and I've worked with them as well. I have been, a huge advocate for, making films and recording music in Louisiana, and I started making a big push about my company Lionsgate doing more work down here. And so I started reaching out to find out who are the people down here who can kind of facilitate that. And so Jay, I don't know if Jay, you want to introduce yourself in this?
Well, I'll just say, I'm Jay. And I'm a composer and I run the Contemporary Arts Center. I know hopefully we'll be doing a class next semester here in film scoring. And so I talked to, I guess, most of y'all at that initial forum when you were starting introducing the curriculum coming up. But, when Joel says, something, a big advocate for doing films down in Louisiana, understand that there aren't many people I've met that actually know as much aesthetically about New Orleans music as Joel does. I mean, he really has a passionate interest in it, and actually, because of his business background and what he does, was able to help Scott and the state legislature craft the law that became the tax credit for recording down here. So he's been involved behind the scenes in making the beginnings of an industry happen here. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky enough, Scott and I had gone to lunch, and he had mentioned that you were coming to town, I guess for the film festival, or something like that. It's funny how you can't remember anything before the hurricane, how exactly anything happened. We just started chatting emails back and forth. And I remember he shot me an email, call me, and I was shocked when I picked up the phone and called, and it was his cell phone, and went right to him. I was like, I can't believe I'm talking to someone at Lionsgate that's in charge of all the music. As a composer, that was like a fantasy dream, to actually get somebody. And so we just started talking, and what I think probably brought to the table for you initially was just an understanding of studios in town and what was possible in musicians, because there's a lot of responsibility riding on your shoulders when you decide to convince somebody to either go with a creative person or go to a place that they haven't been going to record a score. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong, from lunch not showing up to the engineer messing up to there's an electrical problem, or just there's not enough music stands, headphones. I mean, the list is endless. So Joel had to really, it took about a year, I think, of sort of talking, and Joel would come to town a lot, and we would chat and go around and just get him comfortable with what was possible. And right about when I think we really had a chance to make something impactful happen, the storm hit. And I'll never forget it. I was living in Baton Rouge, and Joel called me and said, look, man, I guess it was like October. September, October, and he was working on a film. He didn't tell me what it was, but he said he wanted to do something down here. Could it be done? And I think my initial answer was, I don't have any idea, Joel, if anything can happen here. And about a month later, after I checked the scene out, he was convinced that when I became convinced, he became convinced that we could actually record a score down here. So we put together January 4th. 6th, was it the 6th? So like right after the law came into effect, Joel flies to town with Tyler, it was Tyler Perry's Medea.
Medea's
Family Reunion score, and we had orchestra members. I mean, the orchestra wasn't even back in town, driving in from Texas and coming together, and spent a day in the studio recording that score down here. Mm-hmm. And that was really a huge step, not only because it was the first orchestra score done in New Orleans on that level, of that size orchestra. Obviously the first one done after that hurricane, mm-hmm. which made it even more complicated, but it really, you got to really appreciate how hard, and I only know it peripherally, he must have worked to convince the composer, the director, the producer, Lionsgate.
Well, I figured this one was actually an easier one than most. I kind of wanted to do this before. Tyler Perry's, from New Orleans. The composer, Elvin Ross, was living down here and lost his home in Katrina. And so it was like the creative people were kind of like, predisposed to want to do it. My hard part was convincing the money people that their multi-million-dollar investment was in good hands if we went down to a studio that didn't have any running water or phones and record, a symphonic orchestra in New Orleans, post-Katrina. So, Tyler Perry, stepped up and said, let's do this. We're at the last second, but I think that they can do it, and I think that we should take a risk at it. And it turned out fantastic. We were down here for a few days and recorded over at Piety Street in the Bywater, and it turned out great. So, we had intended to do this as kind of like a showpiece to show that, symphonic music could be recorded for film as an underscore in New Orleans and done cost effectively. It could compete with places like Seattle, where a lot of the scores are recorded these days. It just so happened that it was, after Katrina, and so it became a little bit of a bigger story than just, a showpiece about that it could actually be done. It should show that it could be done, with the city still in ruins, that if you could bring the creative people together and you put them in a studio, you're actually going to get something that is, pretty special. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, that was the original idea, was, just to show, the mechanics that it could actually happen. So, with the tax bill in place now, hopefully there's going to be a lot more music recorded down here. I'm still doing an effort with a lot of the films that are being shot here to show them that, while they're down, you might as well go and check out some of the sound stages, recording studios and whatnot, to see if you can actually record your music down here and take even more advantage of some of the tax breaks you can get.
What about if somebody in the room had music they wanted to put into one of your movies? Do you listen to music?
Constantly, all day long.
So they can send it to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I say.
Send it to him first?
No. We listen to music all day long. And again, like I said, many of the films that we're doing, in fact, most films now, the music budgets are pittance compared to what they used to be in days past. So everybody's looking for, what we call like kind of breaking bands that are unheard so far. In other words, cheap. So, we're always on the lookout for somebody that has a fresh take on what they can do, something that will really work on our films and stuff like that. And every music supervisor worth their salt want to be, the first person out with, a discovery like that. We're actually, there was a big article in Billboard recently that film and television is the new radio, because, radio is so rapidly vanishing, record stores are vanishing. And the way that bands are being broken these days is not through spins, because Clear Channel owns all the stations, and so they've got pretty set playlists. So the only way people hear new music is by watching even things like the OC and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. They're talking about that's how bands are really broken these days. So every music supervisor wants to be responsible for breaking like a band. Like the OC does at times.
You must have a lot of publishers sending you stuff, right?
Constantly.
Do you send out notices to them about what you're looking for?
Don't need to.
So they just constantly flood you with things.
Yeah, I mean, if a publisher is doing their job or a label is doing their job, they're going to read the trades. They're going to see what pictures are in production. They're going to find out who the music supervisor is. They're going to kind of figure out for themselves what music is needed. And then kind of tapered for that, and they'll know, like, oh, okay, Joel, you're working on Tyler Perry's next movie, so you need obviously songwriters, and so they'll basically know what we're looking for. It's a waste of my time to go out there and kind of like put a broadcast out there. I might go to certain people that I really trust, and they say, what do you got? I need something like this if I'm not getting what I want, because I can't necessarily always be passive about it. So, but the outreach that I make is going to be to really specific people that I know have exactly what I need.
Can you talk a minute about the various types of music? I mean, I know that you can have a hit song over the credits, and there are other things. Could you talk about that for a second?
As far as the way music is treated for film, you're talking about
the way it's used in the movies.
Well, I mean, most ways that people pay attention to really is, like you say, like a hit song over the end title. That's generally something where they will find an existing song, something that's going to be coming out as a single that they can tie in with the film's release, so they get a little bit more marketing bang for what they're trying to do. So it's instantly recognizable. You get a great emotional burst. You can potentially put it on the film's trailer, and also help sell more records. That's one way of doing it. You can also have something written specifically for the film in that way. The other type is, again, you get a little bit more into music created specifically for the film, which is something that I, am much more passionate about, more than just even the licensing of music, because then it gives you the opportunity to work creatively with the artists, with songwriters, with composers, and kind of craft something that works organically with the picture. And a lot of times it is, it's much more gratifying to have that kind of like hands-on approach to it. Plus, you're also creating an asset for the film that then they can own and get more revenue from later on, and actually can do some more creative stuff with.
So you not only license music, but you hire people to write music.
Do a work for hire for like the composer or for a songwriter, and basically, as it says, a work for hire, you own the copyright and then have it specifically created for the motion picture.
Do you see any trends? I mean, does music change in what music you use in movies?
Constantly. I mean, everybody watches everybody else's work. It's like films become a lot more sophisticated in the way you use music, so it's you have to kind of be on your toes and kind of watch what everybody else is doing so that you're one step ahead of the next. There's a lot of competition in that regard. And the same thing can be said for underscore. You look at the past, like 30, 40 years of the way that that film scores have evolved from, the basic, golden era of Hollywood film scoring to what it is now. It's almost, sound design and scores start merging, and songs and scores all start merging. They all start becoming one, and you have to be really deft at the way you use all those different tools.
Well, who do you have to? You have to convince the director. Is that the guy?
Yeah, I mean, what I always say is the director is more or less the final say of what goes into the picture if it's done properly. A director worth their salt is going to be able to say, okay, that's great, I love that. Eventually the studio who's spending all the money is going to have like a veto power of some sort, but if they trust their director, they're going to let their director have their vision. A music supervisor's job is not to necessarily pick and put music. They're there to advocate for music, for using their experience and their kind of like, sense of, everything from budgeting and everything like that and relationships to say, okay, why don't you listen to these 4 songs for that one scene and see if anything works for you. And the director says, yes or no, or, I want something a little bit more like this. And it's the supervisor's job to kind of put everything, the plate before the director, who can then pick and say what they want and kind of temper it, and not necessarily have to have the director pick all the music, although directors these days are becoming more and more savvy about, breaking bands and everything like that as well.
Can you think of an example where great music has helped a mediocre picture, or the reverse may be true?
I've worked on a lot of mediocre pictures, so really? I like to think, it's always the case when I worked at Trimark and Lionsgate, I didn't have much of a choice about what pictures I worked on. I worked on everything that they had. So in a lot of cases, you'd get a Leprechaun 6 in the hood, and they'd be like, Joel, we need 16 brand new rap songs. And I'd be like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And what my job is, what I always told everybody that I worked with, is not to figure out how to fix a movie. It's how to use music to elevate what's already there, because you can't really necessarily fix a movie using music. You can make it more interesting, but then you can always get to the point where you're starting to force it, and you can tell when it's being forced. And you're just throwing everything against the wall, and it just starts sounding a little desperate. But if you kind of keep your level of quality up, that's the best can be expected. In fact, you talk about something that was pretty terrible. You talk about seriously like Leprechaun 6, Back to the Hood, or something like that I worked on, and those are some of the best movies I worked on, because they were pretty much ignored by the studio and gave me free reign to kind of do something really interesting. It's not always what I would say is my finest work, just because you have to deal with what you got. But it's the kind of cases where you're presented with a challenge, and where something is utterly terrible, you can make it watchable, which is sometimes the best you can do. So.
Well, that's a good start anyway. Maybe we should ask if there's anybody in the room. Anybody have a question of Joel or Jay? I think we have a taker.
Do the movie producers ask for original songs, or like popular songs, or do you decide that?
It's kind of collaborative. It depends on who you're working with. Every situation is different. If a producer kind of has been through this a few times, they know the value of having something created, and they know that it's possible. And if a music supervisor is any good, they're going to know who to reach out to. So I personally prefer to have more music created for the film, again, because it's much more organic, it's much more special to that picture. It's something that won't be available anywhere else. And it's something that, again, will, on the business side of things, will create an asset owned by the film company that can be, later turned around and done something more with. So, most filmmakers look at songs coming in, they look at it as from the licensing perspective. They want to hear the new Death Cab for Cutie song or something like that, and they want to be able to license something and put it in there. But, and we can always do that. We can always find stuff. It's a lot easier for us to do it that way, just because it's already there. We don't have to worry about what it is. We just throw like 15 different songs we think match and get it up there. But I personally prefer to find songwriters that I really like and say, hey, here's an opportunity, here's a scene. Do you want to try and write something to this? And give it to maybe like 3 or 4 people to see if they want to try it and do it as like that, do something wholly original.
Explain to us, Joel, though, take the example. I mean, obviously, if you're licensing something, somebody wrote it, someone already publishes it, you know, someone owns the master tape, and you're paying for all, I mean, I assume you're paying boom, 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 you're paying the people who own the tape, people who play, you know, who wrote the song.
No, see, that's
the,
you're talking about on the licensed material?
If someone already, if it's already out there.
If it's already a pre-recorded existing song, what you're doing is you're basically calling up the various rights holders, and generally it's a master rights holder, which is generally the label, and then it's the publisher or the people who represent the writers. So there's 2 groups of rights that I need to kind of square away. You know, and basically what we're doing is we're paying, they've already paid for the creation of these songs, they own them for perpetuity for however long, and so our job is to basically just, you know, pay a fee for a non-exclusive license so that we can, you know, sync it up to our picture to the master owner and to the publisher. But when it comes to, and then we don't have to worry about generally anybody else unless there's some, you know, union reuse fees or something like that. But when it comes to having a song, original song created, then you're suddenly responsible for studio time, you're responsible for musicians, you're responsible for paying the songwriter and potentially their publisher, you're responsible if this person has a label for, you know, getting their exclusivity released from it. It's a lot more work, but I think that the rewards are a lot greater too.
Which paradigm do you think is more lucrative, the sort of garden state, go find a band, put their music on a CD paradigm, or a Harry Potter original score paradigm?
Which is more lucrative? Harry Potter underscore, you're talking about soundtrack albums. I gotta say, if you talk about return on investment, Harry Potter. Because the only costs for putting, you know, the cost you look at for putting together something like a garden state might be very small, because I know the fact that they didn't pay a lot of money for licensing those things. However, there was a cost, and there are, you know, big royalties that they have to pay out to a lot of these artists. They have to pay, I know they had to pay the clearance people a bunch of music. They paid the music supervisor a bunch of music. All these other people got points on the thing. So a lot of the money gets shaved off as you go, and you have to recoup all these expenses. For the Harry Potter, the one thing I'm not really sure of is that, because one of the reasons I like these score albums is because the assets are already there. You don't have to license anything additionally. You have already created this, and so you can just take the music and put on a soundtrack album. The costs comes into that are what's generally called, you know, new use, reuse payments that go to the union. And I don't know what the deal is. I think it was recorded at the London Symphony Orchestra, so a lot of times they do it as buyout, so there may not be any new use costs. So it would be straight, anything they do, it's just manufacturing, and everything that they make off of that is pure profit. So if it was a buyout situation, then the score for Harry Potter, there's basically, you know, straight profit, and then, you know, the composer's royalty.
Do you have a staff of people that help you?
Yeah, I have a company now. After I left Lionsgate in May to start my own company, and we do music supervision. I have a staff that does music supervision with me. I'll bring some of them along to some of the smaller pictures. I'll do the solo work on some of the bigger pictures. But we're also starting a new kind of paradigm for how music supervision works, where we're contracting out to bigger companies, to these independent studios, like I worked with Trimark, where a lot of these companies don't know what a music supervisor does, doesn't know what a music department does, and we contract out to them to be their music department. And they don't have to worry about overhead and things like that, but we set up their publishing company, we set up their business practices, we make sure that everything is pretty standardized, so when it comes time to turn over the picture to a distributor, that everything is done and they can walk away and get a big fat check. So
is it all movies, or do you do television as well?
We do television as well, yeah.
Do you take interns?
Yeah, we've taken a few interns from Loyola, as a matter of fact. Yeah, they tend to be very, very good.
But there's a few here that I'm sure would be interested.
Well, look, we're always taking interns. It's the lifeblood. It's funny. The entertainment industry is like one of the last places that still has this kind of like journeyman apprentice kind of system, right. And it's the only way it works. Honest to God, if you're looking to break into the music industry or into the film industry, and your name's not Spielberg or something like that, it really is about interning. We've had a lot of people who come through our doors who, you know, come in as like, you know, a summer intern or something like that, and they have great educational backgrounds, but a lot of the hands-on stuff they don't know yet, and they learn a lot by doing internship, but mostly what they get out of it is, you know, kind of one-on-one interaction with music supervisors with labels, with publishers, with studios, with networks, and form the relationships, which are actually much more important sometimes than skills. They'll, get it. I had Sean Rosen was one of our interns for a while who came out of this program, and he, worked for us for a while and then left. He's got, potentially he might be working at the E-Networks or some other places. He's got a bunch of people who are courting him right now. But we've done very well with our interns.
Well, that's terrific. So they should have some business skills as well as music skills.
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I hate to be harsh about it, but if an intern comes to us and they've got great ears, but can't alphabetize, or don't know what the difference between a master and sync are, or don't know the difference between the basic understanding of copyright, then it's going to take a lot of time for us to get them up to speed on some of this stuff, and we're perfectly willing to if they're willing to work and they're very detail oriented. But it's like that's the real lifeblood of how this works, and it really behooves people to kind of understand just the real basics of what music supervision does, or to be willing to really put the time in to learn it, and to be willing to do a lot of the grunge work of being an intern, all the faxing, filing, and everything like that, while they are learning how the paperwork functions, what the different contracts are, what the different terms are for these things, and basically teaching themselves. We're great at my company. We take our interns very, very seriously in that they're basically giving them themselves for free in exchange for an education of how these things work. But the give and take in that is that the intern has to be really there for us to ask us questions and to really listen, and to really we'll give an intern enough rope to basically hoist themselves up or hang themselves, depending on this, because somebody who kind of sits there like a lump and is just filing CDs, it's like we don't have that much space for that kind of people. So.
What's the worst thing about your job?
The worst thing? A lot of times the politics. I always like to say that a music supervisor comes on 9 times out of 10 in post-production. A lot of times music supervisors aren't hired until the movie's shot. And by that time, all the money's been spent. Everybody hates each other. And they've all lost battles to each other, over what the set dressing looks like. Somebody wanted one actor, somebody wanted the other. And the last thing that's going in is the music. And everybody's got an opinion on music. Everybody from the development executive to, the cinematographer to all the actors to everybody has an opinion on music. And so you have to figure out very, very quickly, who is actually going to be making that final decision, and kind of stick with them and be able to manage everybody else and protect that one person. So if it's the director, you get in tight with the director. Usually that's, the secret to that is get in with the editor, because the editor is always the confidant of the director and knows basically what's going on. They're the quiet one that sits in the back of the room and kind of like, puts, you give them the selections of music you want to try out, and they'll cut it in for you and everything like that. And then you kind of like protect your director, and say, hey, look, you tell me honestly what you feel about this stuff, and it'll be my job to kind of fight the producers off for you or fight the studio off for you and kind of help you protect your vision. But if again you find out you start learning that the director really isn't going to be making the final say, you have to work with the director, but understand like what, I'm going to give this to you, but I have to also talk to this one production executive, because that's the person who I can tell is the one who's going to be making the say. But it's so painful when you come down the road and literally you're in a film where everybody despises each other, doesn't talk to each other, doesn't want to get in a conference call, let alone a meeting, and you have to take opinions from all of them and kind of like meld them into a real piece of music. So especially with people who think that they are music literate, but you learn very, very quickly that they are not. So
interesting. Political management. Anybody else have any questions of Joel? Come on down.
Once you've decided to choose a piece of music and say it's an already existing work, what is like the step-by-step process that you go through and you go through to get everything and work out the contract?
It's pretty mechanical, actually. It's the negotiations are kind of an art form that you have to kind of get down. But the mechanics are basically that you find out who owns the master recording. You find out who the publisher are, or if there's no publisher involved, who the writer is. You find out how to get a hold of any of these people. So let's just say if it's it's a major recording, so it's Universal owns the master, and then you can say Warner Chappell is the publisher. What you then do is you write out just a one-page short form kind of agreement that says, I would like to use this song. It runs this amount of time. I want to be able to exploit it throughout the world for perpetuity and all media now known or hereafter devised. I want to be able to use it in advertising. You have to put all this stuff on this one piece of paper. Generally, you have to give a sense of what the budget is, who the cast is, a synopsis, a scene description, how it's used, a timing, everything like that, all on this one page. You send it off to the label or the publisher. Sometimes you'll tell them what you want to pay for the song. Most times they will cross that out, and they will write a much higher number in. But that's basically what you do. You send it off to them. You have a little signature line in there. They go back if they have to consult with the artist or they have to consult with the writer. They do so. They kind of commiserate amongst themselves, and they write down a number on how much it'll cost, and they fax it back to you. And then that's a short-form contract that you basically, sometimes they'll put a time limit of like 90 days or something like that. After that time, you have to go to a long-form agreement. Generally what we'll do is we'll get the stuff pre-cleared so that we have that short form. Then we'll go on to the mixing stage, at which time the directors will change their mind with every song. And so we'll have to pull out some of those songs and frantically, while we're on the stage, start sending off more of those letters, marked super urgent, and we'll replace the music, have the music editor cut a new song in there, get those short forms signed, and finally, when the mix is all done, we have all the different songs we send out letters to all of the rights holders saying that we have used your song. This is a confirmation of all the rights herein, and please send us a long-form license or we'll send you one of ours. And then they will send you a long form, you negotiate all the little nitty-gritty terms, and then you get that executed and you pay them. And that's, like I said, it's mechanics. You just have to be really, really diligent, especially when you're talking about, a movie that has like 40 cues in it, and they're all hip-hop, so they're like, all of them have like 16 samples, and each one of the samples has to be cleared independently. You're dealing with like a binder like that thick of different clearance papers, and you have like all these charts that you have to make sure each and every one of those rights holders, where it's a sample who owns 6% of one song, has to have signed off on that, all the rights, and agree with every other person on that song, otherwise you're screwed. If you miss that one song, what can happen is that this movie comes out theatrically, somebody goes to see a movie and goes, hey, wait, I wrote that little piece right there. I'm calling my lawyer. The lawyer calls up the studio, sends them a letter that says, cease and desist from releasing your movie. And they have the right to do that. They can enjoin you from releasing a multi-million-dollar picture, and it's all the music supervisor's fault. Mm-hmm. So that's why when we get onto the mixing stage, I like to say that's the one time where everybody has to listen to me. Because at that point, if I say stop, you cannot use this song, no way is this song going in the picture. This one piece of paper is not signed. The director will scream and pull out his hair and say, you've ruined my movie. And then I go, hold on one second, let me get the head of the studio on the phone. You tell him. And at that point, the head of the studio backs you up and says, you know what, okay, if this piece of paper isn't signed, it's not going in my picture because I don't want my $100 million epic stopped because of Joe Blow from Iowa who, wrote one part of this one song, and he can do it. So that's why business is so important.
One kind of quick question out of curiosity, did you run into any issues with the backwards playing music in Rules of Attraction?
With the first part, we had if you guys have ever seen Rules of Attraction, it starts with a big party scene with music the scenes actually play forward and they play backwards. And what he's referring to is if you alter, a lot of times in contracts that you have with licensing, if you alter the use of the song, you have to get that pre-approved. A lot of times you have to play it for the artists and get their approval on how you alter it. If you go and remix somebody's songs and stuff like that, it's a change in their copyright, and so you have to get that pre-approved. For that individual party scene, that was actually all underscore, so we had the composers wrote it specifically like that. However, there's a later party scene where we use a song by The Rapture, where we play that backwards. And we actually had to get that pre-cleared. We had to get them to approve the fact that we played their song backwards for 15 seconds before we did it. A lot of people would just ignore it and just say it's it's a slight alteration. But again, I'm a big fan of making sure to cross the T's and dot the I's, especially when it comes to copyright. So we got that pre-approved.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you think about the future of the movie industry, particularly here in Louisiana and New Orleans, with the new tax credits and things like that have been passed in the legislature recently.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic actually down here. I think that speaking to the future of the film industry, I think that it's going to be going similar directions to the future of the record industry. I think that the big you look at Disney's laying off people left and right. All the big studios are really starting to pare down because they're realizing that the huge overhead is only going to work for a little while longer. I think that what's happening is, you look at the music industry and all the big labels are only making money off of their giant artists that they can then sell 500,000 copies or more of. And the big studios are the same way. They are losing money if they're not making like $80 million and above. What's going to start happening, and the same thing is like the same way that all the indie labels are starting to come up, and while they might be making gajillions of dollars like the majors, they're making a living. They're actually supporting themselves or supporting their artists. And the same thing's happening with the film industry, is that a lot of the independent studios are having their insurgents, like Lionsgate and Think Film and all these kind of independent producers and distributors, because there's so many more eyeballs, so many more ways of actually getting these things out there, that it makes much more sense for these people to do something that's much more for a specific audience and have to keep the costs low because of that. So when you talk about Louisiana in particular, one of the things Louisiana has going for it is that it really is a huge cost savings for people to come down here and get the tax credits and work with the crews and everything like that are not going to be the same costs as shooting in Los Angeles or anything like that. One of my clients actually I'm working with is Element Pictures, and they've just done a big deal with Lyft for committing $200 million in production. So it's going to be that's all money that's going to be going specifically into Louisiana productions. So I think that as long as there's enough crews down here and as long as the costs stay low, I don't see how it could, not continue to go. There's enough fans of shooting down here. I know Lionsgate, for one, it had just, they shot Pride down here, and I think they've got a few others slated to go down here, and everybody keeps coming back down here because they like the experience. So I think that there's enormous potential. One of the things, again, that I'm trying to do, mostly because I'm a fan of doing it, is again, pushing the music side of that and actually recording music. I've got a small picture that I'm working on that needed a bunch of music recorded down here, recorded specifically. It's going to be blues and mambo and things like that. And I had the opportunity to maybe record in Los Angeles. We've got some different union issues in recording in Los Angeles, or record in Seattle. But if I've got the option, I figured I might as well go to Louisiana and record down here. It's just as easy to get a studio down here and have people record stuff up. In the age of the internet, you can start sending tracks back and forth and listen to it as it's going. So that's one of the things I'm working with Jay here on, is actually potentially putting together, a super group of people that we can go and record some really authentic, brand new blues stuff rather than having to license some stuff. So, I'm trying to promote more of that kind of an attitude and that kind of a business model for recording music, not just, a symphonic orchestral underscore. So if people, I know that Terrence Blanchard is now talking about maybe for one of his next movies recording the score down here as well. So, and it's about playing to Louisiana's strengths too. Obviously, you've got the best jazz musicians in the world. So if you're doing a jazz-based score, it's almost a no-brainer. Then why don't you come down here, participate in the tax rebates, and do it down here? But it's just making sure that Hollywood knows that it's available.
How big a role is networking in your life? Are you always at parties and stuff?
I don't like to all the time. It really is almost, I'd much rather go home to my wife and my child and hang out and, live like that. But honestly, so much of what I do is based on relationships and being out there. It's not necessarily even the parties so much as it is going and being present at places where that like some of the studio guys are going to be. So you can kind of make sure that you're in their face and they know about you. So, and meeting people, it's like, while I'm down here, I had a wedding this weekend, which is one of the main reasons I'm down here, but, this opportunity came where I could come and talk to the people down here, but I'm also meeting with the guys at Lyft. I'm meeting with whatever opportunities that I can come up here, meeting with the, Alex Schott in the film bureau and Lynn Orso in the music bureau to talk to them about opportunities. So, it really is about finding the connections and just kind of, keeping at them and talking to people. I mean, Jay was one of the connections that I made way back, and, he and I became fast friends, but it's like you have to keep on finding out people who are busy doing things that you want to do and be involved with and collaborating with, and really keeping those connections and those networks open, because honestly, it's the lifeblood of what I do. If I didn't have these relationships, people easily would forget about, everybody else, and, they'd go on to the next person.
But you have some long-term relationships, I'm sure, that you've maintained.
Yeah, I mean, one of my business models, again, is that through some of these relationships, I'm actually contracting with some of these other companies, too, so that I'm their music department, my company is their music department, and that then networks us not just to that company, but all of the films they're making. So all the producers, all the directors, everything like that. Whether we're going to be music supervising all their films or at least consulting with them to do it, we're already plugged into all those guys.
So do you see your business growing in this respect?
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, honestly, we've been out of the studio system for, close to 5 months now, and, we've already got, clients keep growing because they see the opportunity of having somebody. It's much more cost effective to have us to kind of manage their stuff than have to hire whole departments to do it. So we've got a lot of people who are really, kind of hounding at us to do it, and so now we're trying to be a little bit more exclusive about who we work with, so.
Do you have your own publishing company?
Yes.
So you own copyrights?
Yeah.
So you purchase copyrights?
Purchase copyrights, exactly. Have them create work for hire out of my pocket, and have them ready to go in some of these things. But a lot of times, we'll do different kind of arrangements with people and have stuff created specifically for the pictures.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
In 5 years? I don't know. I mean,
kids?
still doing this. I honestly love it. I've been in the film industry for a couple of decades, and when I stumbled upon what a music supervisor does, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is the best. I get to be involved with production, but on the best part of it, I get to be working with music and musicians, and I get to hire people that I love and love to work with. So I get to hire with I may not be a competent musician, but I get to recognize the people who are and hire them. So.
You go to the recording dates and
yeah, every time I can go to any of these things. I mean, that's I don't necessarily, if I'm hiring the right people, I don't necessarily have to be there because I trust them. But again, why the f am I doing this if I'm not going to recording sessions?
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Any other questions? That's it?
Come on.
We know everything
Anyone.
we need to know?
I'm here for you.
Well, let's give Jay and Joel a big hand then. Thank you very much.